So if your A1c is fairly good, you got nothing to worry about, right? Well, not exactly. Welcome to Beat Diabetes. I'd like to say a special greetings to those who are participating in our Fall 2022 Challenge. And the goal is to beat diabetes by Christmas. That is, by the day after Christmas, to have your A1c down below 6.5. Some of you are coming from way up there in the 11, 12, 13, 14. Others, you haven't had quite so far to go, but I am challenging you. Let's get that blood sugar down, and we've given you the guidelines. I won't go over them all right now, but I believe most all of you can do it, and if you can't, just hang in there and give yourself a few more months, and a whole lot more will be able to do it. I want to give a couple testimonies, and we're going to talk about the subject of today's Beat Diabetes. Here's a testimony. This person started in September with the challenge, the Fall 2022 Challenge. Since I started your challenge, they write, in September, I started with an A1c of 8.7. Today, my A1c is 5.7. Well, it's not Christmas. I mean, we're just in November right now, and already they've done it. They have not only gone from the diabetic to below 6.5, which would be non-diabetic, they're knocking on the door of being totally free from that pre-diabetic label. At 5.7, they're just at the boundary line of that. Give them one more tenth of a point, and they won't even be pre-diabetic according to the numbers. They say, I would like to say thank you for all the information you've given me. Continue to do the good work. Well, you keep it up as well, my friend, and you have made phenomenal success. 3 points. There are some doctors that if they had to look down through the years of their patients, they could hardly find anybody that made that much success in that short of a time. Yet we hear this all the time. Here's another testimony. I wanted to thank you for your work on Beat Diabetes. The information you put out was a big help. July 16th, I was diagnosed with type 2 and immediately started to research. And of course, I came across your channel. I like that. I was researching diabetes, and of course, I came across your channel. Well, the time was when that wasn't the case. But these days, if you type in too many things about diabetes, you probably will come across Beat Diabetes. So they say, with the help of God and your channel, I went from a 12.3 A1c, which is very, very high. And this past week, my blood sugar, or my blood work went down to a 4.7 A1c, which is phenomenal. 4.7. My doctor has taken me off my Jardians, and as you can see, I am in remission. As you can see, I'm in remission. Well, I think so, with a 4.7. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. So the testimonies keep coming in. And if you're not there yet, don't give up. Just keep on. And if you're not involved in this challenge, we plan to start another one in February of next year, February 1. So plenty of time to sign up. You can actually start signing up now. But it's too late to sign up for the fall challenge. It wouldn't be fair to you. Or it just wouldn't work because the time is running out in a hurry. I mean, it's going to be Christmas in another month and a couple of weeks. So for those of us that are involved in the challenge, and it's just under 2,000, around 1,900 people that are involved in this challenge. The last one, we had more time to kind of promote it, and we ended up with somewhere around 4,000 people. But so they are signing up by the thousands. And we're getting reports, many, many reports of victory over diabetes. So anyway, you can sign up for the spring, I guess you could call it. February 1, it begins, 2023, the Lord willing. Okay, well, here is the testimony, and it involves the issue that I wanted to address on today's edition of Beat Diabetes. This person says, I am a 65-year-old type 1, and it kind of amazes me that type 1 diabetics watch our channel, but they do, and I will admit, I don't focus on type 1, but there are some similarities, and there are some common themes that are involved. Anyway, 65-year-old type 1 diabetic. My early years were pretty poorly controlled. For a long time, I bought the idea of less than a 7 A1c target In other words, the doctors told me if you can just get under 7, 6.9, 6.8, 6.7, anything under 7 is good. It kind of amazes me because when you're in that pre-diabetic range of 5.8, 5.9, they'll say, oh, you better watch it, you're getting up there. But once you cross the boundary line, they don't want you even back there in the 5s at all. Many of them don't, not all. So anyway, this person says, I bought the idea that if I can just stay under 7, she says, or he says, very little changed. But finally, they did make a change, and they write the last 7 years, I haven't been above 5.5, which is wonderful. Remember, type 1 diabetic, as low as 5.2, but mostly 5.4 to 5.3. My retinopathies have completely healed, so the eye issues gone. My blood work is great, wonderful. No meds except, of course, for my insulin. Remember, type 1. If you're type 2, probably you won't need it once you get everything under control. The one thing that has never healed is my neuropathies. And that's kind of a thing where some people, they totally reverse their neuropathy and their feet pain, toe pain, numbness, all of that goes, and others it doesn't. And I guess part of it depends on the individual and part of it depends on how deep you went into neuropathy. And that's why when you start feeling a little bit of tingling in the fingers or in the toes or some pain in the toes, do something about it right away. Don't wait. You know, the first step is usually tingling. The second step is pain. And the third step is numbness, where you just don't feel anything. Now, you might say, well, that's a relief. I don't feel pain anymore. Yeah, but that's because things are dying and you're in bad shape. So it's kind of like when your foot goes to sleep or your arm goes to sleep, you've cut off the supply of life and blood to that foot or that arm. And when you first wake up, you may not notice much, but then the blood starts returning and there's pain for a little bit, and then finally everything gets back to normal. So do something about it quickly. Now, this person goes on to say, the one thing you should mention is that it is critical that you don't achieve an optimal A1c by having extreme lows offsetting your highs. That's extremely hard on most of your organs. Well, I agree completely. That's why we opened the Beat Diabetes program today with the idea that you can have an A1c that's pretty decent. Some might say good, and yet you're getting it the wrong way, and you're not really doing yourself a whole lot of good. You're doing some good. It's, if your A1c is 5.5, let's say, that's a whole lot better than 12, even if you're getting it the wrong way. But if you're getting it the wrong way, there's some damage going on, and your prospects are going to end up looking worse as time goes on. Now, how can you get an A1c the wrong way? Well, here's how you would do it. As a type 1 and as a type 2, it kind of works the same way. As a type 1, you can have the wrong kind of a good A1c simply by determining, I'm not going to let my blood sugar go too high, so yeah, I'm going to eat a high-carb meal, but I'm going to give myself extra insulin to make up for it. And what generally happens is there's no way you can really stop a spike when you do it that way, when you have the high-carb meal. But what you can do is keep it from staying up very long at that high level because you give yourself quite a bit of the fast-acting insulin. So what happens is you go up high, and you don't stay there long, and then you come back down. Now, oftentimes, your ideal level may be something like this. So this may not count. You may start here, but you'll actually go down too low at a certain point. And then you'll eventually bounce back. So this can kind of be a normal experience for a type 1. You give yourself so much insulin that you still can't stop from spiking, but you won't stay up too long because all that insulin is flooding your body. It'll catch up eventually. So maybe for the first hour, you're up there around 200 milligrams per deciliter or so, or maybe more. But because you've given yourself so much insulin, it'll start dropping. I think a better word would be plummeting down, and then you will hit your ideal level around 100, 95, whatever, and you'll just keep going for a while, maybe down to 70 or 65 or whatever, sometimes lower because you gave yourself so much insulin. Now, is that even relevant to a type 2? And the answer is yeah, especially if you've got a pancreas that works pretty well. There are different kinds of type 2s. Some have pancreases that are very sluggish and are not putting out much insulin, and others have pancreases that are actually quite responsive, and their problem is not their pancreas. A lot of times we just assume if you're a type 2 diabetic, then your pancreas must be bad. Not necessarily the case. Or you're not producing enough insulin. Not necessarily the case. In fact, usually not the case. So what happens with a type 2 is basically you have pretty much the same routine. Here's your ideal level. You go up sharply. Now, you're not giving yourself insulin, but what's happening is your pancreas is sensing that your blood sugar is escaping. It's gotten out of the enclosure. It's going too high. And so what happens is your pancreas is just dumping insulin, kind of like the type 1 who's just injecting way too much insulin. So your pancreas will eventually catch up with it, maybe around 200, maybe 250, maybe 300 milligrams per deciliter, and then it'll start dropping just as well. And sometimes it will go too low. And that's what was happening with me in my early days. I was having reactive hypoglycemia. I was down here some of the time. And I remember talking to a pharmacist describing my situation. She says, well, maybe you have both. You go too high and too low. And she was dead on, and she was exactly right. I had both, too high and too low. Now, if you're doing this, if you're bouncing up and down like this, you may end up with a fairly decent A1c because it's going to average out. So you're going too low at times, and you don't stay up very long. So you may end up with a pretty decent A1c. And so when you take a test, an A1c test, your doctor tells you, well, you don't have anything to worry about. You're doing good. What he doesn't know and what you don't know is you're bouncing way too high and you're dropping too low oftentimes. Now, let me show you something else here. And that is, even though this is your pattern as a type 2, this will not stay your pattern forever. It may stay quite a while. It may stay your pattern. And every time you have a meal, bounce too high, drop too low, bounce too high, drop too low. Kind of like the air conditioner that's going allowing you to get way too hot, and then you're freezing cold, back and forth. Again, your A1c may be okay, but over the years, you're going to wear yourself out. Your body's going to become immune to all the insulin that is constantly being flooded from these sharp peaks. And eventually you won't have this forever. Now, type 1, they may go on like this pretty much forever because they can determine how much insulin. After a while, your pancreas will wear out to a degree. Your body will become more and more immune to all the insulin that's being pumped out, and that's called insulin resistance or metabolic syndrome. And guess what? Here's what your peaks will start to look like. You'll go up high still, but it'll be a much more rounded curve. And instead of going up and dropping down almost immediately, you may stay up there for a couple of hours or 3 hours or 4 hours. And so that's not a healthy thing. And the longer you go eating high carb, and this is the problem with a lot of the people that are high carb, low fat, they're proud of themselves because right now they're at this first point and they're not testing their blood sugar much. So all they know is the A1c has turned out good. And they say, well, hallelujah, I've solved my blood sugar problems. No, they haven't exactly solved them. They've got their A1c better. But if they wore a CGM, or they just took a lot of tests with Mike, the glucose meter, they would find out that the up and down is what's going on. It won't stay that way. You'll wear yourself out, and eventually, maybe here you're at the age of 20, and here you're 45, and by the time you get to be 70, and you still stubbornly insist on eating a high-carb diet, You may stay up there a long, long time, maybe 4, 5, 6 hours you'll be up before you finally slowly drift down. Meanwhile, you're hurting your organs, you're hurting all kinds of things going on in your body. You're becoming more insulin resistant. Your pancreas is wearing out. No more of this stuff. You may have stayed here for 20 years. You may have stayed here from age 35 to 55. But suddenly the peaks become longer and longer and longer in time, and they just don't drop down. And you'll never drop down too low anymore. You don't have to worry about that. You'll barely reach your ideal level before you'll have another meal, and boom, this whole thing will be repeated. So this individual made a lot of sense, and I really appreciated what they said, which is you should mention, she tells me I should mention, well, I just did, so I took your advice here. You don't achieve the optimal A1c by having extreme lows offsetting your highs. That is hard on most of your organs. That is not the way to get a good A1c. But a lot of people are saying, well, I fixed my problems, my blood sugar problems. I eat rice all the time. Well, this is how they fixed it right here. And this is where they're headed eventually. In, I'll say most cases, I can't predict for every single person, but in most cases, that's what's happening. So much better to be moderate and gentle with your body. You've only got one body. You don't have a spare. You know, a lot of times we have spare this and a spare that. And one of my computers is wearing out, and I just ordered another one. That's fine. Hey, I can't order another body. I'm stuck with this one. And there are no spares until Christ returns. So we've got to make do with the body we have, and we better be very gentle with it and careful of it. All right, that's it for now. Hope you enjoyed this. If so, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to our channel so you are notified every time we post a new video. God bless. See you again soon. Starting on Thursday, November 17th, Benedict and I will begin a 3-part study on the virtuous woman from Proverbs 31. This is the most famous passage in the Old Testament related to God's standards for women. But in between the lines, you learn a lot about the virtuous husband as well. Be sure and catch this wonderful study of God's perspective of the ideal woman, beginning on Thursday, November 17th.